You call yourself lazy so often it barely registers as a thought anymore. The unfinished project. The email left unanswered for a week. The gym membership you haven't used since January. But watch closely, honestly, at what actually happens in the moments right before you avoid something. It isn't peaceful. It isn't restful. Your chest tightens slightly, your mind races, and then, almost involuntarily, you reach for anything else to do instead. That's not laziness. That's a threat response. And once you see it clearly, you'll never call it laziness again. Real laziness looks calm. It looks like genuine indifference, a shrug, a simple lack of interest in doing anything at all. But this doesn't look calm at all, does it? It looks like a person frozen in front of a blank page, heart rate slightly elevated, stomach tight, unable to type a single word despite genuinely wanting to. That tension is the giveaway. Laziness doesn't tense up like that. Fear does. And underneath nearly every task you've ever quietly avoided, fear is exactly what's actually been running the show the entire time. Avoidance gets mistaken for comfort constantly, but they are not the same thing at all. Comfort feels light, easy, genuinely restful. Avoidance feels heavy, even while you're doing something else entirely to escape it. You scroll, you clean, you suddenly reorganize a drawer that's been fine for years, all while a quieter, more persistent thought sits underneath everything, refusing to fully disappear. That thought isn't laziness whispering to you. It's a specific fear, dressed up convincingly as a sudden urge to do literally anything except the one thing that actually matters right now. Notice how exhausting avoidance actually is, despite looking like rest from the outside. A genuinely lazy afternoon leaves you relaxed. An avoided task leaves you drained, restless, quietly irritated at yourself by evening, even though technically you did nothing all day. That specific exhaustion is the clue most people completely miss. You're not tired from doing nothing. You're tired from spending an entire day managing the low hum of fear running underneath everything, using busy work as a distraction that never actually works. Underneath the avoidance sits one quiet, persistent question, running constantly in the background whether you consciously hear it or not. What if I actually try, genuinely try, and it still isn't good enough? Starting something makes failure suddenly possible in a way that not starting never does. As long as the project stays unopened, the email stays unwritten, the idea stays untested, it technically can't fail yet. It simply waits, safely, in a kind of frozen potential, protected from judgment for exactly as long as you keep avoiding it. Your brain doesn't actually distinguish clearly between physical danger and social or professional failure, not at the level where this response actually originates. The same ancient alarm system that once warned early humans about real predators now fires for a difficult conversation, a public mistake, a project that might not measure up. It floods you with the exact same urge to retreat, to avoid, to protect yourself from a threat that isn't actually physical at all. Calling that laziness is like calling a smoke alarm annoying, when it's actually doing precisely what it was built to do. Fear of failure often disguises itself as an entirely different problem, one that sounds almost admirable on the surface. High standards. Perfectionism. Simply wanting to do things properly, thoroughly, without cutting any real corners. But look closer, and the pattern reveals itself clearly enough. If it can't be done perfectly, it doesn't get started at all. That isn't actually a standard. It's a very effective, very well disguised way of avoiding the possibility of doing something imperfectly, and having to sit afterward with the discomfort of that imperfection in front of anyone else. An unfinished project is genuinely safe in a strange, uncomfortable way. It can always theoretically become brilliant later, in some imagined future version of itself that never actually has to face real judgment. A finished, imperfect project cannot hide behind that same comforting illusion anymore. It exists now, visible, open to actual feedback, actual comparison, actual failure. Many people who call themselves lazy are actually just protecting an imagined perfect version of their work, one that only ever gets to stay perfect for as long as it remains completely unfinished. Every day a feared task gets pushed off, it quietly grows slightly larger in your mind, even though nothing about the actual task itself has changed at all. The email that was mildly uncomfortable on Monday feels genuinely dreadful by Friday, purely because avoidance has had days to feed it, to let your imagination fill in worse outcomes than reality would ever actually produce. This is precisely why waiting for motivation or courage to naturally show up rarely works. The fear doesn't shrink with time. Left alone, it reliably grows. On top of the original fear, a second, heavier layer eventually settles in. Guilt about the avoidance itself. Now you're not just afraid of the task, you're also quietly ashamed of yourself for not having done it yet, which makes starting feel even harder than it did originally. This is exactly how the cycle compounds silently over time, fear creating avoidance, avoidance creating guilt, and guilt creating even more resistance to ever actually starting, until the task feels genuinely unbearable to even think about directly. The first real shift happens the moment you stop calling it laziness and start calling it what it actually is. I'm avoiding this because I'm afraid it won't be good enough. Say it plainly, even just to yourself, quietly. This single act of naming it accurately does something laziness as a label never could. It gives you something specific to actually work with, instead of a vague character flaw that only ever makes you feel worse without ever pointing toward any real, useful solution. Once fear is named clearly, the next move is to shrink the task down until it barely feels threatening at all. Not write the entire report, just open the document. Not have the entire hard conversation, just send the first message asking to talk. The fear response is triggered by the size of the imagined outcome, so making the very next step small enough quietly slips it past that internal alarm system, letting you actually begin before fear has time to fully mobilize against you. Somewhere along the way, failure quietly got redefined as anything less than perfect, which makes nearly everything you've ever attempted a technical failure by that impossible standard. A far more useful definition exists. Failure is simply not trying at all. By that honest measure, a finished, imperfect piece of work is already a genuine success, regardless of how it's actually received afterward by anyone else. This single reframe alone removes an enormous amount of pressure from every single attempt you make going forward. Even a genuinely disappointing result stops being a verdict on your actual worth once you start treating it as simply information instead. This didn't land the way I wanted, so what specifically would I actually change next time? That question keeps you moving forward. The old fear-based question, what does this say about me as a person, only ever keeps you frozen, replaying the exact same worry on a loop that never actually leads anywhere useful or productive. You were never actually lazy, not for one single day of this. You were protecting yourself from a threat that felt genuinely real, using the only tools your mind had readily available at the time. Now you have better tools. Name the fear honestly. Shrink the step down to something manageable. Redefine what failure actually means before you even begin. None of this makes starting effortless overnight, and it was genuinely never going to. It simply makes starting possible again, which is exactly where every real, meaningful change has to actually begin. The next time you catch yourself reaching for the label lazy, pause for just one moment and ask what's actually underneath it. 9 times out of 10, honestly, it's fear, quietly doing exactly what fear has always done, trying to keep you safe from a failure that hasn't even happened yet. You don't need to eliminate that fear completely before you start. You just need to stop mistaking it for laziness, and start walking forward anyway, one small, honest, imperfect step at a time.